Welcome to Capital Gains, Yahoo Finance's unique look at how US government policy will affect your bottom line long after the presidential electoral polls have closed. I'm your host, Rachelle Akuffo. Now, of course, we're less than a month away from Election Day, and it's been a busy week for Vice President Kamala Harris, releasing this new pillar on the care economy. We also saw this huge media blitz to really expand voter outreach after really not giving any interviews before the debate. So we're also going to be breaking some of this down in these weeks leading up to the Election Day, what we're seeing from both candidates. And of course, later we're going to be joined by Michael Medved, host of the Michael Medved Show, to discuss the state of the race and where voters stand on former President Trump's economic policies as well. So first, of course, as always, want to introduce my co-stars, Ben Werschkul and Rick Newman, to break down what they've been watching this week. So Ben, let's kick it off with you.
Yeah, so without, it's kind of a different dynamic here. Without a debate or without a lot of big events, we kind of have a real sense of at least on economic issues, the back and forth between the candidates. You know, you mentioned the Kamala Harris media blitz, and it was an interesting dynamic to me of a dance she has to do between convincing middle of the road voters, especially men, which is a big issue right now, that she's a face of change, but also that she's an economic moderate. It's a dance she has to do that's been tricky this week. And on Trump's side, you're kind of seeing him trying not to cede the longstanding Republican advantage on the economy. Voters tend to think of Republicans as the party of the business. That's a little bit more in question this year. So a little more on Harris, which is that in this media blitz she did this week, you know, the most striking moment to me, Rick, you can add more, but is she was asked a couple times of sort of, what would you be different than Biden? How would you be different? She didn't have an answer. She didn't have a sort of prepared thing, which you would expect she would have. On The View, she just said, nothing comes to mind. And then she brought up bringing a Republican on later. And then on Colbert, it was a similar thing where she didn't have a sort of set answer there, which kind of points to this complicated picture she has. And then also, as you mentioned, the care economy, a big push on expanding Medicare for at-home for seniors, which I think it was a real focus on the sandwich generation. We'll see how much that goes. But before I get to Trump, Rick, you had a real interesting survey of Yahoo Finance folks about these dynamics.
I thought the big takeaway was going to be when she said on CBS, she said, "What kind of gun do you have?" "Oh, I have a Glock." "Have you ever shot it?" "Sure, I have. I'm in law enforcement. I've shot it at the range." I thought that was going to be sort of a moment for her, but it just got swamped by these other things. How are you different from Joe Biden? Gee, I don't look like Joe Biden, but other than that, I can't think of anything. I have a story that's going to be coming out soon. We sometimes just put together these online polls just of Yahoo Finance users, and we ask our own audience, how do you feel about these things? So I did one about Trump 2 weeks ago, and I did one about Kamala Harris. And I asked people, do you think Kamala Harris is more liberal than Joe Biden, about the same as Joe Biden, or more centrist than Joe Biden? And you can see the whole story on our website. But, you know, among people who said they haven't yet decided whom to vote for, Trump or Harris, 61% of those people said that Kamala Harris is more liberal than Joe Biden. And only 19% said she's the same, and only 6% said that she is more centrist. So she is trying to create this image that she is, in fact, more centrist than Joe Biden. And according to these respondents, that's not working. And there are a couple of other findings from this survey of our audience that suggest similar things. I asked what people think about her changing her views from 2020. I did not use the word flip-flop in the question. I just said, why do you think she's changing her views? And a lot of them said she's just doing that to get votes. They think she's more liberal than she's letting on. So she still has work to do to persuade the few percentage points of persuadable voters, I think, that she is the centrist she's trying to portray herself as.
So then you have to wonder what they're focusing on when they're trying to make that decision. Is that sort of the policies that she has benefited from, when it's sort of the economic policies, and then some of the stuff that, you know, perhaps the Biden-Harris administration didn't fare so well? How does she get to sort of pick and choose which bits she can really shine with, Ben, versus some of the things she could sort of put off as, oh, I wasn't the president at that time?
Right. I mean, that line of the Colbert line jumped out at me too. But, you know, the "I'm not Joe Biden." You know, it feels like she needs to do a little bit more than that to draw a difference. But one thing that's really interesting in the polling this week is that voters actually think this, even whether you can sort of disagree whether this message is effective. There's voters who think of her as the voice of change. There was a New York Times Siena poll that asked voters that, who's the candidate of change? One's the sitting vice president, one is the former president. Kamala Harris won that. She was 46 to 44%, so it was close, but it shows that she's able to do a lot, basically because she's not Joe Biden, that does separate her from that. And so we'll see whether that, combined with people knowing she owns the Glock, helps her that, or if it's going to be these policy issues.
By the way, why is there no video of her actually shooting the Glock? I mean, she needs to go to like a shooting range in Wisconsin and drink one of her beers, or I guess you should probably shoot the Glock first and then have a beer. Where is that video? I mean, didn't we from time to time get like John Kerry like trying to shoot a pheasant or something in his
Trump's other obsession is that she didn't work at
McDonald's.
Trump's other obsession is that she didn't work at McDonald's because there's no picture of that. So maybe they'll release all these pictures all at once that show it all.
Yeah. So, just to go, I'm gonna address what Ben said just real quickly, Rachelle. We talk a lot. A recurring theme among the three of us is what matters more, policy. We're always talking about policy, but then we wonder, like, does anybody actually care about policy? It's just a popularity contest. Kamala Harris. She's actually campaigning on things where she could quite easily say, this is how I'm different from Joe Biden. She could say, and she could frame that in a way that's not offensive to Joe Biden or Joe Biden's, two supporters left in the Democratic Party. She could say, well, Joe Biden got us started on green energy. I'm going to take us to the next thing. Or if that's not the right issue, Joe Biden got us started on some health care improvements, and I want to take it to the next level. And here's how I'm going to do that with the care economy. So she could say, well, Biden got things started, but I want to take them further. And of course, she has this one easy one just sitting right there, not for our audience exactly, but abortion. I mean, she's a woman, and she's a younger woman than Joe Biden. It's never been a real comfortable topic for Biden as a Catholic. She can just find a way to say, well, I'm going to be more aggressive about this. And by the way, when Biden ran in 2020, the Supreme Court had not overturned Roe v. Wade yet. Now they have. So that's kind of a misstep by her and her whole campaign. I mean, everything we're talking about here, does she even have time to pivot on these things in ways that will get through to people or not? Nobody knows.
So then, Ben, does the grade that Biden gets on the economy transfer to Harris as well? Like, if we're trying to base it on like one thing that people can sink their teeth into as to the difference they're going to make to the economy, what do you think voters are looking for?
It's sort of whether they associate it with Biden, I think, in a lot of ways, because I do think there's a real kind of baked-in thing that Biden's economy is unpopular, but the record stock market high is popular. The record manufacturing construction is popular. The inflation cooling, I guess to a certain extent, is popular. So it's this fine line she's trying to do it, but not have it be associated with Biden as much.
So short update on this, and Ben, you looked at this earlier. So I've been running the Yahoo Finance Bidenomics report card since it was actually the Trumponomics report card in 2017. Same methodology, carried it over to Biden. And by the way we measure it, and we just put numbers in and numbers come back out. The Biden economy has now jumped from a B+ grade from 2 months ago to an A grade, and that is because the way we do this is we compare the economy under Biden to 7 prior presidents going back to Jimmy Carter. Biden has the top marks on job creation, manufacturing job creation, and GDP growth. Tops out of 8, and that's just data. That's not that we're not putting any judgments into that. And the thing that's improved for Biden has been real earnings, which we adjust for inflation. So that doesn't mean the economy is super, and it's certainly for a lot of people who are still dealing with rent that's too expensive and food prices are too expensive. Yeah, it's not a super great economy. But compared with prior presidents and compared with Donald Trump, the Biden economy is actually better on paper.
Well, we'll see what that means come November 5th. But of course, we've got to take a quick break. We have more coming up, including our special guest after this break. So stay with us on Capital Gains. Welcome back to Capital Gains. We're joined now by our guest, Michael Medved, host of the radio show, The Michael Medved Show. So, of course, trying to break down the state of the race right now. For some of these undecided voters, I mean, we're less than a month away, especially for Republican voters who are perhaps wondering if some of the policies that they're hearing from Trump, at least, are in their best interest. What are you making of the undecided voters right now, Michael?
Well, I think that one of the things that they want is they want change, but they don't want radical change. And it seems to me that the point for the Harris campaign will be talking about just how monumental the changes are that Trump is talking about. Like, for instance, he is claiming he is going to deport 20 to 25 million people, which is as he proudly says, the biggest deportation in all of American history. I think when people focus on the idea of building detention camps and rounding people up and actually spending $1 trillion, which is what the estimates seem to be, the responsible estimates, the notion of these mass deportations should scare people, and the impact on the economy of taking that many people out of the labor market. And by the way, according to the statistics, we don't have anywhere near 25 million undocumented immigrants. What you're talking about here is ripping American citizens, sometimes the children of the undocumented, ripping them out of their homes and doing real violence to the American economy and to the whole fabric of decency in this country.
By the way, Trump recently said about the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, he said, I don't care if they're legal or not. And they are legal. Trump said, I don't care if they're legal or not. They're illegal to me. So it's like he defines illegal immigrant as somebody who he just prefers weren't in the country. So I'm just putting that out there. Michael, I just want to ask you more broadly
and most
about.
Most of them are not cannibals or dog eaters.
That's correct. Thank you for clarifying. Just more broadly about this whole issue of the lies that Trump tells. One of the ones that I focus on and we really care about here at Yahoo Finance is the tariffs. Tariffs are taxes that are going to raise prices for everybody. They're going to raise prices for everybody. Almost no politician ever runs on a campaign to raise your taxes and gets away with it. I can understand, some small portion of the electorate that doesn't quite understand what he's talking about. But, according to the polls, like half of America doesn't think that Trump's tariffs would be a tax on them. Can you understand why so many people seem to believe these lies?
Because they don't want to spend the time digging into it. One of the lies that we're having right now is the notion that Trump is fiscally responsible. Generally, Republican brand means you're more fiscally responsible. There were pieces in both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times about the projection of the economic changes that Harris and that Trump were making, and that Trump would more than double the amount added to the national debt with his changes, including the tariffs. So the idea that we're going to be deeper in debt, that we're going to have a less viable Social Security and Medicare system, that we're going to have this wildly irresponsible orgy of spending while charging people more money for everything because of a 20% tariff across the board, that should be something that should get attention from Vice President Harris and from the Democrats before the election.
Yeah, I really agree with you on sort of why voters are sort of tuning out tariffs, Michael. But why not the people in Washington? Why are we seeing not as big a response? We see these long lists of former Trump national security folks that are now against him, but we don't see a similar economic one. Why isn't there more speaking out about the tariffs specifically amongst economic policymakers who know what this would entail?
Because nobody believes that he'd get it through Congress. Nobody actually, and this is also the point with the mass deportations. It's not so easy. The president just doesn't sign an order, and all of a sudden you uproot 20 to 25 million people, which is what he said he will do, and you do it on your own. And this goes to the deeper issue, which the polling does indicate has some resonance for Democrats, which is the idea of Trump as a dictator, not just on day one, but his whole vision of his presidency. When he says things like, I don't care whether they're legal or not, that is not a respect for law and order. And Republicans have always embraced the idea that this is the party of law and order and of the Constitution. And the Constitution should be a very viable and pressing issue right now for Kamala Harris and her supporters.
So, Michael, though, when you think about the misinformation out there, or the voters who've already dug their heels in, are they as concerned then about doing the work, about finding out about if the tariffs are going to affect them, or if certain parts of the Affordable Care Act are going to end up, cutting their bills or making them pay more? It doesn't seem to be sinking in. What do you think needs to happen between now and then that the Harris campaign can do, or even that the Trump campaign can do, to perhaps either just really make it clear for people what it is that they're voting for?
Well, it seems to me that Trump is doing a lot of this with his rhetoric. There have been a number of pieces that have looked at the level of anger, the level of extremism, which is embedded into his rallies and his public statements and even some of his interviews recently. And given the fact that Trump believes that's the source of his strength and that he is embracing the idea of fight, 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 I'm not sure that anger is such a big sales tool right now, especially with good news on the economy, which we have been getting on the market, on the rate of inflation, on the fact that today there are items showing that a cart full of groceries is more affordable today than it was when Biden took over as president. And by the way, one of the things you were talking earlier, and it's a very important conversation about Kamala Harris more effectively differentiating herself from Biden. One of the ways she can do that is on this issue of immigration, is that she would be different because she would work with Congress and not be stopped by Trump's own presidential ambitions to get through the Langford bill and other bipartisan legislation to actually tighten the border and to make sure that we have the repairs to the immigration system that everybody believes that we need.
The Nikki Haley voter. This is or the supposed Nikki Haley voter. I mean, so this is sort of like a group of conservative normies who are sort of in exile, I guess. So some people did vote for Nikki Haley in the Republican primaries and not for Trump. And then Nikki Haley endorsed Donald Trump. And some Democrats think that they can get some of those Nikki Haley voters to vote for Kamala Harris instead because they're not going to follow Nikki Haley over to Trump. Is that a fantasy, or do you think there are some persuadable Nikki Haley voters out there?
Well, I was a Nikki Haley voter in the Republican primaries. Oh, yeah, sure. And I have definitely gone over. Look, the key thing right now, it seems to me, is one of the other things you were talking about before, is people perceiving Harris as more moderate than her public image was when she was running for president back in 2019 and 2020. And I think she's been doing that effectively. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at the American populace right now, people are not radical. They're not angry. They're not bitter about the country's future. And people who have this apocalyptic idea that if Trump doesn't win, that's the end of the republic. We won't have a country anymore. That is so unhealthy. It's unhealthy for younger people. It's unhealthy for the economy. It's unhealthy for just basic American sanity. And that idea of Trump and of Harris, and Walz being the sane center, it seems to me should be a focus for the campaign in the 3.5 weeks remaining. And I can't believe it's that soon before what will be a fateful election.
Some people can't believe it's not over yet.
Yeah. Is there one
Well,
thing
it'll still be
Michael,
revisiting us in our dreams. Let's just hope that
Right.
they are pleasant dreams.
Is there one symbolic thing, Michael, that you would advise Harris to do in these next 3.5 weeks to get to these Nikki Haley voters? I read an interesting column in Politico about how she should make Mitt Romney the Secretary of State. She should announce that now. Big outreach to kind of the moderate Republicans. Are there things like that you think would help?
Yes. And I think that her campaigning with Liz Cheney was very moving. They went to Ripon, the founding place of the Republican Party, in the crucial battleground state of Wisconsin. Good for them. And there are so many prominent Republicans, including people like Paul Ryan, who seems to have gone into a witness protection program somewhere. But people like Paul Ryan and Jeb Bush and President Bush, and there are a lot of Bushes out there, and coming back with people who are Republicans, conservatives, with a following. I think Mitt Romney is certainly one of them, doing as much bipartisan campaigning as she possibly can, would be very effective for Vice President Harris.
When are normie conservatives going to reassert themselves within the Republican Party?
You know what most people would say: when Trump loses. But of course, the idea is, and it's funny, it's something I talk about with my wife. My wife has already asserted herself. She's changed her registration, her orientation from Republican, which it's been for years and years, to independent. And it's very encouraging today. There was new polling that showed that in the state of Florida, Kamala Harris is way ahead, 14 points ahead among self-described independents. That's a key to maybe even making Florida competitive, where they have a surprisingly competitive race involving incumbent Rick Scott. And this to me is one of those untold stories, is that some of these Senate races, some of the gubernatorial races, in other words, I think it's very likely at this point that Kamala Harris is going to carry the state of North Carolina because of Mark Robinson, the GOP nominee, Trumpist GOP nominee for governor, who has so many scandals, including deeply anti-Semitic scandals in his past. And the fact is that some of these struggling Republican candidates could have a real impact on suppressing the turnout for Donald Trump. There was a piece that I covered on the air yesterday from Arizona Christian University and George Barna, who teaches there. And they were looking at the self-described evangelical or born-again Christian white vote. And half of the people who identify that way say they're not planning to vote, which, by the way, changes the election, because in the past, the rate of participation for that group has been close to 70%, and 80% of it, or close to, going to Trump.
Oh, that could be a big difference maker. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. A pleasure having you on this episode of Capital Gains. A big thank you to Michael Medved there.
Thanks, Michael.
And also, of course, to my co-hosts, Ben Werschkul and Rick Newman. I'm Rachelle Akuffo. That does it for this episode of Capital Gains.
Thanks all.